if Beretta manages some sort of hostile takeover of Ruger, they will lose the American market.
There, and welcome to this episode of the Guns Podcast US. Thanks for joining us here on one of the world's biggest gun talk programs as we chat about the interesting stuff that makes up the world of shooting. Well, we've got a fight brewing today in the gun industry, and we're going to air all that dirty laundry here in just a minute. But first, a quick word from our great sponsor, EOTech.
Best known for their legendary holographic weapon sights, EOTech is built for speed, precision, and rock-solid reliability. That focus extends across their lineup, including high-performance rifle scopes for tactical use and hunting, plus durable pistol optics for professionals and enthusiasts alike. EOTech also delivers advanced night vision, thermal, and laser systems trusted by military and law enforcement worldwide. To explore the full lineup, visit eotechinc.com.
Well, I'd like to welcome my co-host, Roy Huntington. How you doing there, Roy?
I'm fine, but my ire is up.
Well, we got when we were cops, we used to call this a domestic disturbance. We got a fight brewing in the gun industry, and it's pretty unusual. And I think if you haven't heard about it, you're going to, because it's going to get ugly, and it may significantly change the entire U.S. shooting industry. So we're talking about Beretta versus Ruger, and it is quite a mess. I'll give you the quick rundown, and then we'll get into kind of discussing what's going on. Beretta, which is one of the world's oldest continuously operating companies, not just arms company, just companies. It's been around 500 and some years. Of course, they make legendary firearms, both civilian and military. They're engaged in a proxy war with Ruger, a American company started by Bill Ruger Sr. And if you're not familiar with corporate raider lingo, which frankly I'm not that much, but basically what they've done is they are now the single largest shareholder of shares in Ruger. Ruger's a publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange. Anybody can buy their shares. Well, Beretta quietly assembled the majority, and it's I forget, it's somewhere in the 20 percentile, but that's the single largest shareholder. And what happens then is with each share, you get a piece of a voting right. Well, now they're the biggest shareholder, so they have the biggest ability to vote in the annual shareholders meeting. So what happens in a proxy war is the company or a group of people that amass a number of shares, what they do is then they elect their people to the board of works, or I'm sorry, the board of the company. Board of directors. Couldn't think of the word. And then they institute the policies and procedures that they want. So in essence, they can take over the company, and then once they're in charge, they essentially sell it to the company that kind of ran this. So that's what's going on. Beretta's trying to buy Ruger. Ruger should need no introduction to U.S. shooters. They've been a legendary company in the U.S. firearms industry. They're probably, I don't think it's even arguable, they have been the most fiscally responsible of major U.S. gun companies. Of late, they've kept a balance in their checkbook, like $80 to $100 million each quarter. So they've got money, they've got good product, they've got a solid reputation, and Beretta wants some of that. And what's unusual is normally these things get handled over a meeting, a lunch. The attorneys get together, some paperwork's and signed, and it happens. Witness CZ bought Colt recently, and personally, I think that's for the better. I think Colt needed that infusion of help. This one is going to be different, and now we've got dueling press releases, and people are calling people out. And Roy, that's not something you see a lot in the gun industry. So that's the long and the short of it. I think I covered most of the salient facts there. What's your perspective as a guy who has been watching the business side of the industry for a long, long time?
I don't think people realize the significance of this because the average shooter is probably not even aware of this, unless they're getting the outdoor wire and whatnot.
Yeah.
I haven't really seen it in mainstream news media. Thank you very much, mainstream news media. But basically, I think if someone hears, oh, it's a hostile takeover, right?
Yeah.
They don't really know what that is, but that's what's happening. This is the thing that I was appalled by, is that so Beretta just fired a shot across Ruger's bow here a week or so ago, and they put a press release out that went in all the wires, that went into the entire shooting industry. And they basically said that Ruger is irresponsible, the leadership is not doing their job, they're driving the company into the dirt, and we, Beretta, are trying to come in and do the best we can to help save this grand American company.
We're just trying to help.
We're just trying to help. I was astounded. I mean, in 45 years in this industry, I have never, not one time, seen a company take on another company publicly like this.
Yeah.
Maybe there was, but I sure haven't heard, and I've been in the middle of it for 45 years. So, I'm sorry, but you do not do that. Other companies are screwing up. That's fine. And you let them screw up. They don't need any help. Right. But Brent and I were talking before we started the show, and that if you go into the Smith & Wesson booth at SHOT Show and you say, hey, what do you tell me about Ruger? Talk to the president of Smith & Wesson. And I promise you, he or she will say, I think they're a good, strong company. They make fine products. I think they take good care of their customers. I'm proud to be in the same industry with them. That's what you hear.
That's it word for word. They all say that, which is good.
It's a supportive. This is the only industry I know where competitors will help each other.
Yeah.
There were times there where like Ruger needed springs and Smith & Wesson was able to connect them with a supplier to get their springs that they needed. And it's astounding. And so this, I don't know if it's this European way of thinking.
That was my follow-on question, Roy, because you pointed it out in our private conversations, and I've seen it myself, that American companies have a certain way of doing things because the American market is so different. We can own multiple guns. We can own all the guns we want. We can, generally speaking, go shooting and hunting, and as much as we worry about the negative legislation and laws over shooting, it's nothing compared to Europe and other places. So American shooters and the American shooting market is kind of the Wild West. And, if Ruger brings something out that fails badly, somebody else is going to come out with something that will not. So shooters here have a choice. The European mindset is so much differently. And you've dealt a lot more with the European gun manufacturers, Roy. Talk about your experience, not specifically Beretta, but just how Europeans tend to approach us unwashed Americans in our market.
Well, I agree with you, and that's a good thing. I would like to say, though, that following Beretta's initial press release, which the entire industry was reeling by this,
Yeah.
I got phone calls from people saying, what the hell? Talk about airing dirty laundry.
Yeah.
So then Ruger came out with a press release saying, we want to clear up this hysterica that was put out by Beretta. Well, I notice in today's now, Beretta put out another press release.
Oh, and
basically reattacking Ruger, saying they were lying and they're this and they're, he says, she says. I just was amazed. I will say this. That's how they do business in Europe. Okay? Two New Yorkers, when they're together on a street and they're having a good conversation, are yelling at each other and calling each other names. And then if you ask about this, say, what? Oh, no, he's my best friend.
Yeah.
Well, in Europe, that's kind of how they do business. There's like a lot of yelling and finger pointing and name calling and mudslinging, and that's how they do business, right?
Yeah.
Maybe Beretta's CEO thinks that, oh, that's okay. We like Ruger. This is just how we do business. Well, it's not how Americans do business generally, especially in our industry. So yeah, I mean, you have too. We were just talking. Who was I talking to? Somebody about this. There was a big European gun company. They sent me a semi-auto pistol, a medium-sized semi-auto pistol. It was about 20 years ago. It was right at the beginning of the kind of mid-size 9mm auto pistols for concealed carry, and they said, here, this is going to be. We're announcing this in the American market, and so I took it. And I looked at it and I said, well, it's a good size. It's 9mm, it's good caliber, it's good sights. I liked everything about it, but there's no slide release. And is this like a prototype, or did you forgot to put it in, or what? What's the deal? And they said, oh, no, it doesn't have a slide release because you don't need one. And I said, well, wait a minute. I mean, the Americans would be more comfortable with a slide release. Trust me. And they said, oh, it's not necessary because a slide will lock back on an empty magazine. You can reinsert a magazine and then you can load it again. I said, well, no, you don't understand. American shooters would like to be able to lock the slide back if they want to, or drop the slide, with the slide release. And they were just very patronizing. Well, yes, but we'll make them understand how wrong they are.
Sure,
because we're Europeans, and so of course it died an instant death, in the marketplace. No, it was like cue the crickets. And when I heard from readers, they said, "What the hell is that? It doesn't have a slide release, for crying out loud." This is the same company who says, well, you buy one rifle chassis and you can have multiple barrels for different calibers. Yeah. And they never do well in the United States, right?
Never.
Because like Americans tell me, they say, well, I want another caliber, I'll buy another rifle. And they just do not understand that. So,
well, that goes to the point that I was making, that, in Europe, if this gun comes out without a slide release, well, that's what you got. In the U.S., people won't buy it, but they'll run over to Ruger or Springfield or whomever and buy the gun designed by folks that understand our market. So, yeah, I mean, Beretta does good work. They've been doing good work for 500 years. They've got some good product, but I just don't see that this corporate cross-pollination, if you want to put it in nice terms, would really help. And the other thing I was going to talk about, the most recent press release actually made a pretty straightforward claim that Ruger violated a non-disclosure agreement by talking about this. And that gets into some legally enforceable terms if that is indeed what happened, which I'm not party to it. I've not seen the paperwork that they did or didn't sign. But I thought that was the thing that I can't imagine Beretta's attorneys would say, yeah, go ahead and talk about that if it indeed even happened. On the other side, I can't imagine Ruger just blindly fired off a press release without. When's the last time, Roy, that you heard of a big company sending out a press release that didn't say, we got to have legal review this first? So I'm very sure that Ruger, everything that they've said has been vetted by their gun lawyers. So I didn't understand why Beretta would say that, well, they violated the NDA by even talking about this.
Well, because they just will say it whatever they want to say. Because remember, we're talking about in Europe, you say whatever you want to say. Yeah. He is whoremongering, and they're talking about your competitor's company president. So I've seen it. I've heard them. Go to the European section of the SHOT Show, and that's how they talk about each other over there. I know I'm generalizing, and I know Europeans, and they're very nice people, but there is a different way. It's like the way New Yorkers do business is different from the way other people do business. I will go on record right now and say this, and that if Beretta manages some sort of hostile takeover of Ruger and becomes a controlling interest there and starts to direct the direction of the company, gun designs and stuff like that, they will lose the American market. I mean, it won't shut off, but I promise you're going to watch it go lower and lower and lower. And because what's going to happen is other American companies will step in. Yep. In other words, if Beretta says, well, we will make these kinds of guns, right? And American shooters don't want that. They don't want to be affiliated with it, buy American, right? They're going to now go look at Ruger as an Italian company, which it would be.
And
And
there goes Bill Sr. spinning in his grave at 17,000 RPM.
Yeah, exactly. And then so other companies will step in and say, they won't say it, but they will intimate that, do you miss your favorite single shot hunting rifle? you know,
Yeah.
you know, look at our new something, right? And no,
And
I
again,
promise
that's
you,
something the Europeans don't have to deal with. Here's the gun we're giving you. You either like it or lump it.
That's
And
it.
it doesn't work that way over here.
You're right.
So,
I mean, because I was talking to somebody the other day, and they had a European come and visit, and he went to a gun store with him because they didn't have any gun stores right where they were, and the European, he was just astounded. He said, "You can just walk into a gun store like this?" And the guy said, "Well, yeah, it gets better. Watch." And he bought like a 22 pistol, and paid for it. And did his ID, and the guy put it in a box and shook his head and thanked him and turned around, and he said, "Now let's go shoot it." And they walked outside, and he said this guy was like basically just stunned into oblivion.
Where are the bullets?
I know. He said, "You actually have this freedom. You can just go in and buy a gun like that and go out." It was so foreign to him, literally. The guy said, "I had an immediate convert, though."
Yeah. Well, it goes back to that whole darn Constitution that, we pound on, but it truly is a different way than it is anyplace else. But not to cut you off, but I was going to say, I think we ought to talk a little bit about Ruger. Both you and I have some pretty good roots with Ruger. And the point I wanted to make was just kind of exacerbating this problem for Beretta is, as you talked about, if they start taking over design, I know some of the engineers, a lot of the marketing folks, and I actually interviewed the CEO, the former CEO, here on this podcast a while back. Almost everybody at Ruger, from production line to CEO, are shooters. I mean, real shooters. We've talked about that before. That's usually the downfall of a company when you start seeing the guy from, Ford or, ladies' feminine products become the CEO. Unless that person really is a hardcore shooter in their private life, generally you'll see that company start to stumble and fall. And I think that's been one of the real strong points of Ruger is the folks that work there believe in Ruger. They believe in their product. They believe in the Second Amendment. They believe in shooting. And that's not marketing BS. That's based on me sitting around campfires with Ruger engineers talking about guns and seeing the twinkle in their eye saying, yeah, man, we got this one gun that we're going to do this. And then, yeah, we were going to introduce this, but it just didn't seem to really meet the needs of the market. And they talk like we do. And that's not always the case, especially as you get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Absolutely. I knew Bill Ruger. I knew Bill Ruger Jr. and I knew Tom Ruger. They've all passed away, unfortunately. And I'm here to tell you, I mean, I've had dinner with Tom Ruger and Bill Ruger Jr. and they used to host a party every year at the SHOT Show, and so Bill Ruger would be there for a little while usually. But I have to tell you, they're just what you're saying. They were passionate, but what they were mostly passionate about is American shooters in the American marketplace and meeting the needs of American shooters. And they knew what they were. I mean, you look at Ruger's 1022 and the Blackhawk and the original 22 Standard Auto and the 77 bolt action rifle, and all these things address the needs of American shooters. They needed an affordable semi-automatic 22 that worked. They needed a bolt action hunting rifle that was affordable. And Bill Ruger paid attention and he delivered that, and he was passionate about it. And I knew their distributors, I knew their salespeople, and they were all that way too. They respected and they knew they needed their customers, and so they treated them like that way.
Yeah. And
I don't think that Beretta is that way at all. I'm sorry, Beretta, but
you're off their Christmas card list.
I know I'm off your. Well, I haven't ever been on it.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, I think I've been to Iowa. the European equivalent of the SHOT Show, and it's very different there. As you said, it's really pretty patronizing regarding the customers. I mean, there are no. It's pretty common for an American company to say, "Oh, we met with customers. We took our ideas to shooting ranges. We listened to readers and viewers, and so that's why we came out with this fill in the blank." But you're exactly right. The vast majority of the European gun companies and accessory companies just say, "This is what we're making this year, and you can have this."
Yeah.
And it may not even make any sense. It may not even be designed right. And they're used to dealing with it. Well, they're about to come up against a wall here because they're going to try to pull that with Ruger if they take over. And the shooters, their customers are going to go, "I don't think so."
Well, it's going to be interesting. And again, back to the overarching conversation here is whether it happens or not, I think it's pretty clear we don't feel like it's going to be a match made in heaven. But the bigger picture is just this idea of we got a domestic in the gun industry, and airing the dirty laundry in these dueling press releases is just not a good look. And I got to think that some of the anti-gunners in the United States are looking on with glee, thinking, let them tear themselves apart. That's just helping our cause. And I just hate to see it. And, I don't want to paint Beretta as the villain here, other than it is a hostile takeover. But I think it's a clash of cultures, is what this is about. And it's going to be interesting to see. Now, like I said, some of these have worked. CZ purchased Colt, and I think that's overall been a good thing. But the distinction being, I think Colt needed the help and needed the cash. And I mean, would you agree or disagree with me on that, Roy?
Well, that was a negotiated buy.
True.
I mean, when Vista Outdoors sells, or when Remington sold, or all that, that wasn't where people came in and knocked doors down and kicked in office doors and took over. Yeah, that's what Beretta's doing right now. I mean, you know what? I knew this because when Beretta first bought shares, they put out a press release and said, "We would just like to be a part of this very positive American," and they said, "We are not going to try to take over. We're not going to try to do anything."
I remember that.
I thought, you remember that? And it was like,
we talked about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I said, yeah, right. I'll bet. You watch. I mean, talk about the big fish in the pond,
Yeah.
So, and sure enough, and now they're not even making it secret. They're trying backdoor. They're trying all kinds of things. They're trying to, it's like, no, this isn't a good thing. And it's really it's, as you say, it paints the industry in a bad light because people outside of the industry might learn about this. It's bound to hit mainstream media.
Yeah.
And it may already is on some economic shows and things like that, podcasts, but they're going to think that's how we do business.
Yeah.
And
I hope
not
it isn't
how we do business.
Yeah.
And it's not how we do business. So, all right. Well, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, and keep your popcorn handy because we're going to be sitting on the sidelines. And I wrote a story about this this week on gunsmagazine.com. You can check that out there. It kind of talks about everything we've talked about here. But as I ended the story with, opinions don't matter. How we feel about it's not going to make any difference in this. But boy, I hate to see this fight, and I'd hate to. I just don't think this is a good match for the two companies. So, but I guess we'll see, Roy, because when you're looking at my bank balance, I'm not in this discussion. I've got 2 zeros after the digit, so that's my net worth at this point. So, anyway,
you're right.
It's interesting, and we'd like to hear what do you think, because I know these companies do pay attention to what shooters think and understand, whether they're correct or incorrect, because if they're incorrect, they try to educate them and get the word out, and that's a good way that they kind of take the pulse of the shooting community. So let us know what you think. If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment. You can always reach us if you're listening to the podcast by hitting editor at Guns Podcast. gunspodcast.us, and we check those things and we take them to heart. And I'm very interested to see what our community thinks. So, any final parting thoughts on this? I got to say, Roy, you're pretty animated about this.
It's very disappointing, and it's not surprising to me.
Yeah.
I mean, because as you and I both know, when this first happened, when the first purchase came, we both said, this is not going to go well, and of course it hasn't. So I don't know. I think it's okay to stand up to bullies, and I really respect Ruger's press release when they came out. It was very high road,
Yeah.
This is what's said by. This is unfortunate. This is not actually what happened. Here's what our concerns are. Here's, we're looking out for our stock owners. Our customers are important to us. I mean, it was everything that you would wanted to hear. And then, I mean, Beretta's just been mudslinging basically. And I haven't heard anything in their press releases about concern for customers,
They did put that in there, Roy. They did put it in because I pointed that out in my article that I don't know if I quite buy that. They're looking to maximize, their company, which that's pure capitalism. They think there's a business opportunity here by a hostile takeover of an American company. So I at least understand their motivation. But when you try to say go ahead.
Yeah. Well, they're talking about, share prices and stuff. And for the stockholders, but not all the shooters are stockholders in Ruger.
No, not at all. Not at all.
But I don't think they said anything about the end user, the customer. They talked about value to stockholders and stuff like that. But that's not sincere to me. It's like the big bully comes in and knocks down somebody just because they can, or, we'll see though.
I have to laugh. I'm thinking it's in a Simpsons episode where the bully comes in and grabs one of the kid's hands and goes, "Stop hitting yourself! Stop hitting yourself! Stop hitting yourself!" That seems rather apropos in this circumstance.
It's just amazing. I hope this ends positively. I don't know enough about the stock market to understand what it's possible, but from what I do understand, it is possible, in spite of the best efforts of the parent company, for other company to come in and do a hostile takeover. At which point, as you say, they either maintain they run the company, they sell the company, they take the company apart. I mean, I don't know if Beretta thinks Ruger is a competitor and that's why they want to take him down. I really don't know. I mean, because Beretta doesn't make a $400 bolt action hunting rifle that I'm aware of.
Yeah. And we didn't even go down that road. That's kind of a venture capital thing, but it's not unheard of in a hostile takeover that, they totally destroy the company. They take all their intellectual properties. I mean, there's a lot of bad things that can go on, and we've not even talked about that. And I hope this is just Beretta trying to get into our market, but they're already in our market. So I don't know. I guess we'll see. So
my fingers are crossed for Beretta and their employees. I'm sure there's some sweating going on over there right now. And I'm not happy about that. And then speaking as a Beretta or as a Ruger customer, I would sure hate to see things change there. So
yeah, exactly. Well, all right. Before we get going, there is a couple of housekeeping things. First is a word from our great sponsor, EOTech.
To explore the full lineup, visit eotechinc.com.
Well, as we said, grab your popcorn and we'll see where this whole thing goes. And let's hope that great American company continues as the Ruger that we know it, whomever is running the show. So anyway, this is Guns Podcast US, brought to you by gunsmagazine.com and sponsored by EOTech. Make sure that we always say it, run over to gunsmagazine.com. You can see lots of great stuff from many years over there, your favorite gun writers. And yeah, I write there, and Roy writes also, and there's fresh stuff still going up. That's gunsmagazine.com. And you can also check out the podcast, both listen and watch. And of course, we are available on YouTube and any of the big podcast directories. So wherever you watch us, we certainly appreciate that. So anyway, we'll get going on this and bring you another great episode next week on the Guns Podcast US. For my host, Roy Huntington, I am, of course, your host, Brent Wheat. And as I always say, now it's time to get out there and get shooting.